Let us start, as we usually do, with the childhood and the reasons for doing what you do and becoming an actor.
When I was young, I never thought consciously of being an actor. I was introduced to Shakespeare quite a young age by my mother, and I think just narratively, dramatically, that interested me. But it was really when I acted at school. When I went to a grammar school in Salisbury, where I was in a couple of productions, school productions, which I enjoyed, and one or two people said, "You have an ability here." But at school, no one encourages you to be an actor. They flag up to you, you know, it's a very tough life, you'll never get work. And probably from their perspective, it's the right thing to say. But it was going to art school. I did a foundation art course at Chelsea Art School. And I think it was that course, it was the energy of that course. It was designed to challenge all these people coming from school, having done their A-levels or O-levels, to challenge their visual response to life, to everything really. That was to shake you up. And so I think I was sort of shaken up in that I thought, oh, the world, it's open, everything's open. And something in me shifted on that course that I remember one of the teachers said to me, "Why don't you break down this Las Menenias by Velázquez, which famously Picasso did a version of?" He said, "Why don't you just have a go at messing around with the composition of this picture?" And I sort of broke it down and did cutouts of the various figures in the picture and arranged them in a way. In a way, it was a sort of like a stage arrangement, like a bit of stage blocking of these figures, the girl and the dog and the dwarf and the man at the back. And I cut them out, and then it reminded me of the same thing I had done with a small toy theatre when I was a child. And then I thought, oh no, I should like to do stage design, is what I thought. And I went and visited a course at the Central School of Design. They had a stage design course, and I went to it. And suddenly all these things, I remember looking at these designs, the young students' designs of plays, and I remember thinking, oh, this reminds me more of my little Pollux theatre, but actually I'd like to be on the stage, not designing it. And I remember it sort of went through a series of shifts, and then I approached an amateur youth company in Fulham who was advertising a production of Cabaret in Fulham, the Lost Theatre Company. And I went and joined them, and they did evening workshops, improvised. It was all amateur youth company, run by a very inspirational, highly energized man called Cecil Hayter, who galvanized these young people. I did a production of Romeo and Juliet, and I played Romeo. And it was all after hours. It was all quite chaotic, but with great heart. And then I think that gave me the confidence to then think of auditioning for drama school. So
and you went to the National. I mean, you were in Rep for a while, I think, and then you went to
my dream.
The National.
My big ambition was to play Shakespeare at Stratford. Yeah.
And you did nearly 3 seasons, I think.
I did two. Well, I did 2 seasons, which at that time meant 2 years, because you would do a year virtually at Stratford, then a year at London, and then go back again. So I did, yeah, two. It was a total of just under 4 years there.
And along the way, David Putnam, I think, cast you in a television thing about Lawrence of Arabia, later years.
Yes, in my last season at Stratford, I auditioned for this. David Putnam was producing, or executive producing, this portrait of T.E. Lawrence called Lawrence After Arabia. It was really about T.E. Lawrence at the Paris Peace Conference at Versailles in 1919 or 1921, where he had a sort of crisis of conscience about what he had done in terms of negotiating British interests whilst telling the Arabs that he was really, you know, fighting for their cause. So that was my first leading role in front of a camera.
And then Peter Kosminski cast you in Wuthering Heights,
yes.
Heathcliff. Something of that dangerous unpredictability was presumably what Steven Spielberg saw when he cast you in Schindler's List.
I'm told that he saw Heathcliff and was interested. And then I was asked to meet him in London. He was doing just a sort of loose conversational meetings with actors. In Acton, of all places. I remember it was in Acton.
Steven Spielberg in Acton.
No, it was in Acton.
Unknown.
I know I had the same response. I mean, he talked. Actually, it was a very. I remember my first meeting with him was incredibly. He really engaged, because so many film auditions that I had around that time were all quite sort of brief and succinct, quite sort of cursory and sort of brief. Yes, hello, nice to meet you. There's 3 or 4 minutes, and thank you very much. And I remember Stephen really engaged, really asked me about the theatre work I had done, the Royal Shakespeare work I had done. I liked it, and I said thank you very much, goodbye, and then I got a request, would I put something on tape for the role of Armand Goethe? And I think what they did is they sent me a speech, which was an amalgam of different bits of the dialogue written for him into a kind of monologue. And I was asked to go and told to go to a video recording studio in Covent Garden. And just there was a young technician there and just a camera. And I suppose I directed myself.
Mm-hmm. And but your approach to Armand Goethe was, I mean, he was obviously not going to be simply a monster. I mean, he's the camp commandant of one of the death camps, but he was a man who was actually genuinely, in his perception of it, having a lot of problems with the job.
I suppose with the part like that, I did feel that you've got to get right inside it. You clearly, at face value, this was a terrible man doing terrible things, but that doesn't help you if you've got to be him. You've got to be inside his head. And yeah, I mean, it's in the script. He's moaning to Oscar Schindler about all these things he has to do. There are deliveries of fence posts or wire or sacks of cement, or and people are just things, commodities that have to be moved around. The organisation has to happen. So that was, I mean, it was a very good script by Steven Zalian. And Steven Spielberg was very clear. He didn't want a demonstration of quote-unquote evil. He wanted a man doing a job, and what a pain in the arse it was that I have to move this number of people here and this number of people there. And so I felt I was very well directed. I mean, a lot of things, a lot of moments in the film, and it was very thrilling to be directed by Steven. He's very inventive. He was very in the moment. He would have ideas spontaneously about doing things. He would let you do dialogue or speeches again without cutting, so he understood that you've got to kind of let go of your preparation. He liked to sort of slightly mess you up in a benign way, but stop, you've come prepared, you've practiced the speech. And I remember in one scene he just said, do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again, don't pause there, do it again, until I was kind of slightly dizzy with the repetition, and actually then it got better. It got sort of more real, more spontaneous.
Is this the face of a rat? Are these the eyes of the rat? Hath not a Jew eyes? I feel for you, Helen. No, I don't think so. You're a Jewish bitch. You nearly talked me into it, didn't you?
That must have changed everything in terms of, thinking about cinema work. I mean, if you'd thought about, initially it was theatre and cinema just happened to come along, this surely changed everything.
Yes, it did. Suddenly I was, the film was very, had an extraordinary reception, and I guess everyone involved was thrown into the into the limelight in a big way, and I hadn't experienced that sort of thing that happens when a film like that has that sort of reception.
We're moving towards The English Patient, which is just 3 years indeed after Schindler's List, and an extremely, I mean, arguably even more complex character from an extremely complex book itself. And when you first came across the character of the Count, the man who's the Hungarian who's mapping the Sahara.
All mushy.
Yeah, what did you feel about that character?
Well, I love that character. I completely loved his flinty, recessive, difficult, not coming forward, not easy persona. And I mean, Anthony Minghella wrote the most extraordinary screenplay. Very different from the book. It was weird. I'd actually picked up the book in a bookshop out of interest before I knew there was going to be a film, and liked its writing and given it as a present to one of my sisters. But then the word was out there as a film, and then I was asked to meet with Anthony. I loved the screenplay. And I love this character. I liked his difficultness, if that makes sense, how difficult he is.
And the catalyst for the drama, and indeed for taking him to a dangerous level of difficultness, is the affair that he has with this young married British woman, Catherine, played by Kristen Scott Thomas.
I believe I'm rather late.
Good. We're all here. A toast to the International Sand Club. May it soon resurface. The International Sand Club.
The International Sand Club. Misfits, buggers, fascists and fools. God bless us, everyone. Oops. Mustn't say international. Dirty word, filthy word. His Majesty, Der Führer, Il Duce.
Sorry, what's your point?
And the people here don't want us. You must be joking. The Egyptians are desperate to get rid of the colonials. Isn't that right? Fuad, some of their best people getting down on their hands and knees begging to be spared a knighthood. Isn't that right? Isn't that right, Sir Ronnie? What's my point? Oh, I've invented a new dance. Anybody up for it? It's called the Bosphorus Hug. Maddox, Berman, you'll dance with me. Dag. Come on, daggers.
Let's eat first. Sit down.
We'll bathe at Brighton, the fish you'll frighten when you're in your bathing suit so thin. We'll make the shellfish grin, fin to fin. They're playing it far too slowly, but these were the words, actually, before they were cleaned up. Might be a song for you, Mrs.
Shut up or go home. You're completely plastered. Sit down.
Absolutely right. Shut up. Shut up. Sorry. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't think what came over me. Lashing with apologies all around.
Anthony's writing was wonderful. It was a wonderful gift to any actor. And we shot that in Tunisia.
Yeah, it's really beautiful seeing that at the table. So Peter Carey's Oscar and Lucinda, and with your sister Martha, you did Onegin. So there's seems to be, was it at the time that a lot of the best roles that were coming through were in period drama, do you think?
I don't know about the period thing. I mean, I always having this I'd like to do more stuff that's not, but sometimes they just, people box it and say, oh, you do a lot of period drama. And, well, I can see that that's the case, but it's not because it's in period. I mean, I think that, I remember discussing with Martha how you would do Onegin today. You know, you could set it today. I mean, a cynical, well-heeled young man that can inherit a country estate and meet a young, idealistic man who lives nearby, who's a budding writer in a cottage. I mean, you could transpose it. Absolutely, I think.
We're now going to talk about another BAFTA-nominated role, which is for Graham Greene's The End of the Affair, directed by Neil Jordan. So we've moved on just a handful of years, really, from The English Patient. But very much, I mean, in some ways there are kind of parallel themes between the two, in that there's betrayal and there's duty.
Well, no, when I was, you know, when you have to talk about these things after you've done them, the question I was always being asked was, of course, it seems like you're retreading the same territory as The English Patient. And maybe I was, but I love that book, and I thought Neil's adaptation of The End of the Affair was stunning, and I thought I loved working with Neil and with Julianne. I know, there's no question. I find these kind of rather caged, difficult figures like Bendrix interesting.
So this is Maurice Bendrix, who has an affair with Sarah, who is the wife of a friend.
And he's angry. This is a story of hate, he says. I thought it was such a great opening. I mean, I liked the anger in him.
You're alive?
You sound disappointed.
You're hurt.
I just cut myself, that's all. What were you doing on the floor?
Praying
To what?
to anything that might exist.
Well, would it have been more practical to have come downstairs?
I did.
Why didn't you wake me?
I tried. You didn't move. I didn't understand. I knew for certain you were dead.
Well, there wasn't much to pray for then, was there?
A miracle.
And we don't believe in those.
No.
And that siren means you go.
Yes.
In some ways, the challenge of asking people, a contemporary audience, to think about the entrance of God into a relationship like that is almost greater than doing, you know, a 19th or an 18th century drama sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think people wrestle with Graham Greene for that reason, because God is always very present. And I like these God questions. I think they're good.
But they also, I mean, it's also a story of several views of one love affair, and in some ways, you know, that it's recalled in different ways. And that's something, that whole question of, I'm thinking about Spider that you made with Cronenberg. Now, here's a film about a man whose perception of reality is so refracted and broken that we don't really know exactly where the reality lies. Now, how much of a challenge is that for an actor?
A lot of it's intuition about something, about a character. You have to put your sort of analytical, rational head. You can see what it is, but actually it's not, in the end it cannot be helpful. You just have to sort of put on an old coat and a pair of shoes, and I just sort of followed a hunch about his physicality. It was for a makeup test, and it just sort of seemed to come together. But there was this sort of figure that emerged, which David said, yes, this feels right, and it felt right. It felt whatever it was I was growing towards felt good. But I remember once, he was very observant, David, but he doesn't say much. You know, he's a director that's quite calm. He's economic, very, very charming, very sweet, but doesn't talk unless he has something to say. He needs to have 2 takes that are prints, that he, 2 good takes from any one shot, and then he moves on. But I remember that I had this physicality that we were used to. And then I know that for sometimes that mentally afflicted people can sometimes, you know, a limb can go very fast or something like. And in one scene, I kind of rather self-consciously I started to do that in a scene, and he said, "Stop! You've never done that before. Don't do that. I don't believe that." I really, and all that time, he absolutely was on it all the time.
So yeah. he could find a continuity in Jean.
Yes, no, it was just funny. I tried something in the scene, and he picked up on it immediately, that it was obviously discordant. And I mean, I think sometimes you try things, but you know, it's usually best that they come from some inner instinctive impulse. Sometimes if you think, oh, this is a good idea, I think if I come in the door, I turn around and do that, that'll be interesting. Often you can pull it off, but often you just feel there's a slight contrivance in it. And again, like talking about Stephen earlier, about making me do the takes repeatedly, it's good if you can sort of lose yourself to the point of an accident happening in terms of a moment, that you haven't, you know, you're loosened up, and it's great when the director can sort of prod you or wrong foot you. Even sometimes if they can push you to the point where you're feeling slightly frustrated, or what's wrong, it can, because I think certainly for myself, I like to feel that I'm prepared. but sometimes the preparation needs to be sort of shaken up a bit. And I like it when it's when you just, because I think film likes spontaneous energy. It likes the thing that's not prepared. It likes the thing that goes, just spurts off between the actors and sparks.
Maybe the redemption is in the struggle, huh? God has your head, the devil has your balls.
And so, which particular devil had yours?
Ah, you don't want to know about that, Robert. What's your paper really interested in?
In the big pharmaceutical companies. African guinea pigs, cheap trials for unsound drugs, uninformed consent extorted with threats against children,
Christ.
payoffs, cover-ups.
You're in Nairobi.
Unmarked graves.
I knew I'd seen you somewhere
Murder.
before. You're the husband.
That's right. Dr. Lawbeer.
Marcus, happening, my...
Something's going on out there.
Why did my wife come here?
They had written this report. 16 pages of inspired guesswork. I was supposed to provide the missing clinical data. Testify on tape.
Did you?
This could be a raid.
Do you think that a film like that can raise consciousness about an issue?
Yes, up to a point. Yes, it can. I mean, I think it then has for the issue to be provoked and pushed further, it has to have a real campaign behind it. But I think it did. I mean, I think there were questions. It irritated, I think, pharmaceutical lobbying groups in Washington, I believe.
That's something then. So, and of course, rumbling on under all of this is Harry Potter. We've not mentioned so far, and of course now the last one is there, but you had been you'd been there right from the beginning. And who was to know until we got to the end that actually the whole story had really been not about Harry Potter, but about Voldemort? The psychological complexity, it's all, that's it. It was his story. That was we really wanted to know about him at the end.
Well, that was, I was actually, this came through, a lot was to do with Mary Selway, who... Casting director, who I had a huge regard for and produced The Wuthering Heights that we talked about earlier. And she was an amazing force as a casting director. She was a brilliant, sorry if you know this, you may know this, but she was very caring about actors. She was very tough and honest, but wonderfully sensitive to actors and the nature of casting actors and perceiving what they might do. And she was very persistent. I have to say, the proposal of being the Harry Potter, I was totally ignorant of Harry Potter. I didn't know the books. I hadn't seen the earlier films. But then this approach was made about playing the key villain, and it was really Martha, my sister, said, "Oh, you must understand, this is huge, you know, all the children, her children are into Harry Potter, you really have to take this seriously." But actually it was Mary and Mike Newell, the director, who I'm working with now again, and the Davids, David Heyman, David Barron, but principally Mary, who pursued me. And Mary was, I have to say, she wasn't well. She wasn't well, and she died shortly afterwards, very tragically. But I was very affected by her tenacious approach right into the sort of, when she was really not in a good way. And that really moved me. And something about the flame of Mary being determined to get me to play Voldemort sort of pressed a trigger in me. Alongside actually seeing designs for the look of Voldemort, which I thought were fantastically striking, sort of the shaven, the bald head and the no nose, and the whole look was attractive.
And in a sense, I mean, I was partly joking, but in a sense, when you get to the final film, since Harry never has huge distance to go psychologically, you know, he's a good guy at the beginning, he's a good guy at the end, pretty much, it's Voldemort you want to know about, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I think that Voldemort's probably rightly used quite economically, that, you know, he's so high definition Mr. Evil that you don't want too much. Because, I mean, whatever way you cut it, there's a sort of, you know, it's a larger than life quality to it.
we're going to go now to talk about In Bruges and your character in Bruges and show a bit from that. Now, in some ways, people were quite surprised when you began to take on these slightly, slight comedy roles. The great thing about...
It's a very serious role,
Francie. Very serious. But the thing about Harry Waters, who is a very grumpy boss, really, in Bruges to these two hapless hitmen, is that I suppose it's Martin McDonagh's writing is always so great and so precise, isn't it? And it's partly about the language, it's about the way that words are used, sometimes in a quite odd way.
Yeah.
It's almost slightly Pinteresque, do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure that's... I mean, I haven't... Yeah. I mean, I love... The script is fantastic. I mean, it's... There's a thing... It's an interesting thing in film when can really witty, clever, sparky, intelligent dialogue, you know, it's an interesting test of when it can work in a film and when it can not quite work. So I have this sort of interest in what, especially having done Coriolanus, how dialogue can work in film. But this is fantastic dialogue. I mean, the film embraces it. It really likes it. I mean, I think he's directed it really well. But no, I'm sure there's a sort of, well, I think it's to my ear, a lot of the rhythms between Brendan and Colin are very Irish. That feels very intrinsically Irish in the way they communicate. And
it's always that very precise use of sometimes slightly curious words.
Off-centre words, yeah.
Well? The boy is suicidal, Harry. He's a walking dead man. Keeps going on about hell and purgatory.
When I phoned you yesterday, did I ask you, Ken, will you do me a favour and become Ray's psychiatrist, please? No. What I think I asked you was, could you go blow his head off for me? He's suicidal. I'm suicidal. You're suicidal. Everybody's suicidal. We don't all keep going on about it. Has he killed himself yet? No. So he's not suicidal, is he?
He put a loaded gun to his head this morning. I stopped him.
This gets worse.
Subsequent to that, The Reader with Stephen Daldry, Hurt Locker with Catherine Bigelow, also The Duchess, which you nominated for a Golden Globe. But by now, of course, you work with a wide range of directors. Were you at every stage taking note of what they were doing because you thought you might direct one day yourself?
Yes, more in the last 3 or 4 years. I was really curious. I say they were curious, but I felt this deep curiosity to want to get behind the other side of the camera. Because
obviously you'd played Coriolanus on stage, but it's Shakespeare, and it's not an easy Shakespeare at that either. So very much a challenge for a first film, surely.
Yes, but I suppose I got to a point where I thought, you know, I'm heading towards 50, and life's, you know, you only got one life, and you're either gonna go out there and, I mean, I really think the story of Coriolanus is really always relevant. I mean, I just think it's got this. It's so textually dense that I think it's sort of occluded or stopped the story that it could be being. It's not an easy play. It's not. It's difficult, and I think it will always be difficult. But it's as a story, as a parable of politics, of a crisis of leadership, of a continual, perennial state of the nation, expose of the continual dysfunction as how we, as tribes, parties, families, never can get it together. I mean, I think it's brilliant in essence. And I wouldn't leave me. So the fact that it would never leave my head. Ever, so I got to a point where I'm going to try and do it, and anyway.
And you decided to sort of balkanise it in the sense that you actually filmed in Belgrade and around. So I mean, did you want to make explicit connection with the Balkan conflict?
No, what happened was I was lucky enough to be introduced to John Logan, who wrote an amazing screenplay based on a pitch I gave him about a contemporary version of Coriolanus, And then for a moment there was a financier interested who then was prepared to fund location scouts to Eastern Europe. We chose, I mean, crudely in my head, I had two places where you could film it, would be either Latin America or Eastern Europe. I think it was always going to be a film that was going to be budgetarily challenged. So where can you film it to give it scale, to have the streets, to have the parliaments, to have the marketplaces, and where you could afford it, and in a country that has a strong or reliable film infrastructure. The idea was that the Rome of the story is any city today. Rome is a place. It's an idea of a city. It's not Rome, Italy. So, but I knew I needed a city that we could afford to shoot in.
Caius Marcius Coriolanus, bear the audition nobly ever.
Caius Marcius Coriolanus.
No more of this. It does offend my heart. Pray now, no more.
Look, sir, your mother.
Oh, you have, I know, petitioned all the gods for my prosperity.
Nay, my good soldier, up. Ah, my gentle Marcius, worthy Caius, and by deed achieving honor newly named. What is it? Coriolanus must I call thee. But oh, thy wife.
My gracious silence. Hail. Wouldst thou have laughed had I come coffined home, that weeps to see me triumph? Aye, my dear, such eyes the widows in Coriolanus wear, and mothers that lack sons.
That was very much something that John Logan consolidated and brought to the table, was really to use unapologetically the presence of television and news reports, particularly to answer the question of how you deal with messengers in the play. You have messengers coming on, but I guess the modern messenger is the television report.
Jon Snow becomes the modern messenger.
Jon Snow is our modern messenger.
Do you think you were tougher on your performance than other people's?
Yes, I think it's a very odd experience watching yourself back repeatedly in rushes. You go through all kinds. Well, you go through a whole kind of range of things, from deep embarrassment and revulsion to other moments when you go, yes, yes, and then you go back to revulsion and neurosis again. I had a wonderful editor called Nick Gaster who was there as a sort of the still point, the calm centre, to go. I'd say, I think that's a good take. No, I don't think so. I think that's better. But and it was a great. I learned a lot in editing, and I understand now about when people say performances are made in editing. I mean, I understand that now, because the slightest shift, or where you cut and where you leave the camera on someone and you go to the other person and all those things.
Is that anything that can affect you as an actor, though? Do you think, knowing that? Because you can't think, yeah.
I think even film actors who haven't been through that process through experience know. They just know about. They just see their work cut. They just know about what the options are, and that's why some actors are very. They want to give different readings, almost purposely. I can do soft, hard, funny, angry. I mean, they can know. There's a whole range of. I can't do that myself, but I know that some actors do.
One of the great moments in British cinema history is in the 1940s David Lean version of Great Expectations, when Magwitch pounces on Pip in the graveyard. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you see before you the next Magwitch. This is a role that does in itself come with expectations, doesn't it?
I think these Dickens characters are like Shakespeare characters. They're huge. They occupy our sort of collective imagination this very, very strong, rich way. And everyone who's in love, who's read the Dickens books or like Shakespeare's plays, we hug them to us as they make a mark on us when we're young, when we first experience them. And of course, there's a sort of possessive quality about this. So this is the one. This is the one. People always say the Magwitch graveyard scene, the David Lean, is, you know, rightfully one of the great cinematic moments. And when people have watched it when they're very young, it's very frightening. So clearly, there's there's a lot to live up to. But I think in the same way that, you know, we're going as long as Shakespeare's plays have traction, or Dickens, or any of these writers. And they think they do, however much we might go, oh, another Shakespeare, oh, another Dickens. There's still something in their essential humanity that makes us want to read them or see them. But I don't know what it'll be, but I couldn't resist it. It's not in my, slightly out of my comfort zone in casting, but that's good.
Well, we'll look forward to seeing that in about a year's time, and we'll certainly look forward to the next directing, and indeed I'm sure many other roles. But in the meantime, thank you very much indeed, Roy Fiennes, for your life in pictures.
Thank you very much. Thank you.